Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Behind the Pixels podcast. I'm Brandon.
I'm Moose, and we have a special guest with us this week.
I'm Weston.
Weston's one of our good friends and potentially going to be our video editor soon.
So say a little hi to the people, Weston.
It's on the internet now. It has to be true.
That's true. Yeah.
This is true. You can't get out of it now.
It's a commitment now.
The contract is formed. So this week we thought we would take a step back, kind of look at our own individual histories with gaming, and discuss some of the things that brought us into the gaming world and what we remember from our lives growing up with games.
Yeah, so I had the question that I wanted to sort of pass around, which is, how did you get started in gaming? Where were you when you got your first console, when you first went over to your friend's house and played your first video game? What was that moment that it sort of clicked and you were like, I like video games. I need video games in my life.
Now, I don't know if I can remember a period before getting my first console that I actually played like console games. So
Arcade games count too, though. I mean, that.
But I don't remember like any actual vivid memory of gaming prior to actually my dad bringing home a Nintendo Entertainment System and setting that up. I was like maybe 5 or 6 years old. You know, barely had a grasp on anything in the world, but I knew what that device was. I knew I could look at the manual, and I knew I could help him set it up. And I remember having to connect it to my TV, just this crazy thing that had its own rolling stand underneath it, which was a really strange TV. You had to actually tune the UHF channels, with push button dial on the front. So having to actually get it connected in the back, with the UHF, U connector on the back, and dial in to the right minute, selection where you'd actually get the frequency so you could actually play the game. And setting that up and getting it going, and then failing miserably as a kid at Duck Hunt. Like, that was what it was. Because my dad wanted to play with the Zapper and play Duck Hunt, so that was what we played first, and then played Mario Brothers because that was also on the pack-in. But that was the first time I kind of remember being introduced to the idea of video gaming in general, but I got it. So I'd either seen it before or just somehow innately got it. But that was where it started for me.
When I talk to a lot of people, Duck Hunt / Mario is definitely one of the ones that a ton of people started out with. And I know I played stuff beforehand, and actually my mom always has the story, she says, of the reason why I like video games, because moms like to take credit for everything that possibly happens in your entire life, is that she played Mario, and she had a Nintendo when I was just about to be born. I think it literally just came out or something like that. I can't remember exactly. But we had a Sega Genesis, and we had it for a long time, but we only had this one F1 racing game that looked like blocks, and it was terrible. And so I never really played it until I went down to the valley and visited my aunt, who had a Super Nintendo and a Link to the Past. And that was the first time I realized that video games could be addicting, or something more than just kind of a twitch, a little thing to do while you're sitting still, something that could actually involve you and be really, interesting, and you be invested in the progression that's occurring and things like that, because I think none of the games I played before that had that. So mine actually seems a little bit late compared to a lot of people's, but I think I was like 7 or 8 and playing Zelda Link to the Past. I played it so much that she said, she gave me the Super Nintendo and Zelda and said, play it at home, so when you come visit me, that's not what you want to do. So that's how I got my first, the first console that was really mine.
For me, I was a Genesis kid. It was almost as if it was destined to be, too, because the Genesis was released August 14th, 1989, and I was born August 13th, 1989. Right after I was born, Genesis came out.
You couldn't wait.
Yeah.
You had to go get in line.
I was in line right there. But we had my mom worked, I believe she was working at a computer warehouse at the time, and one of her coworkers had this Genesis I don't know how old I was. I've never been good at keeping track of how old I am. But one of her coworkers had this Genesis they didn't want anymore, along with Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And that was my first console, was that Genesis, which I still have right there. And I have my Sonic the Hedgehog 2 from when I was a kid. And I remember putting so many hours into that game. It would be out in the living room, and we would be playing Sonic the Hedgehog, both me and my mom, just power blocking it, just, all the way through. We only beat it a handful of times, though. And I remember for a while, the cheat codes, I had them memorized. I was...
Cheater.
Yeah. I remember
casual.
being the cool kid for a little while, because I was the kid who would come over and I'd be like, oh yeah, level select, debug mode, I got it all. And then we went on and I got more games. Toe Jam and Earl was also a spectacular game that I remember growing up. Not a lot of games left a mark the same way, though, that Sonic the Hedgehog and Toe Jam and Earl did, though. Toe Jam and Earl 2, not the first one, obviously.
I don't actually even know what that game is.
Really?
Oh man,
Yeah.
You need to
Spend more time here.
Yeah.
I think we need to play through the Toe Jam and Earl games.
The Toe Jam and Earl were spectacular, both musically and visually, and just in the level of weirdness.
Well, I mean, who doesn't want to, groove out to some funk music?
Yes. Oh. But yeah.
Wes, we will take you to Funkotron.
All right. Yeah, it sounds like it's kind of something in the vein of Earthworm Jim or something like that. Like kind of weird.
Sort of, yeah.
Or
It's still a platformer, yeah.
Weird mascot platformer,
Yeah.
funky music, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on that Genesis. And I pretty much just had that for the longest time. I didn't get new consoles until we got hand-me-downs from my cousin, who was lucky enough to get not new, but he got them, a little bit after they came out. But still,
Far newer than you did.
Yeah. He'd get the PlayStation, and then he'd get the PlayStation 2, and I'd get his PlayStation, which I also still have all of those.
I don't think I've ever...
That's his GameCube with the stickers over there.
I don't think I've ever gotten a console when it came out. Like, not ever.
Not day one.
I don't think, yeah. Or even year one.
Yeah.
I think it's always been at least a year out that I've adopted whatever it was.
It's as a kid we couldn't, I'm sure none of us here could have afforded it. Like our families and all that, it's just not in the cards. But
I'm sure that we couldn't afford it. But I pestered the crap out of my mom to get a Dreamcast. And it wasn't day one, but it was pretty early on. Because I was just sitting there. I wanted a Dreamcast. I saw all the release games that I wanted. Wrote the list down. Looked over the list over and over and over again. Dreamcast came out. All those release games got pushed back so far. But I still got my Dreamcast. And I loved the heck out of that.
Do you still have it?
I still have it. Still working condition.
Nice.
Lost a lot of the games. Like, I have the cases. I have no idea where the discs are.
Are you guys saying like that you still have things? Always cracks me up. The only thing I still have is the PS2 and my Game Boy Color, and that's because I hid them from my mother, so that she couldn't get rid of them. When we adopted the Nintendo 64, my dad went out and sold the Super Nintendo, and then when we got the GameCube, he actually took the 64 and sold it to get the GameCube. But at that point, we actually could have afforded it. It was fine. It was just that he couldn't possibly comprehend the idea of keeping older tech to move on to the new thing. So that was always interesting to me.
I always was a little bit of a hoarder growing up. I had a collection of, and it was always electronic stuff. I like to tinker, so I always had a collection of just broken electronics and stuff like that. So I didn't really have a problem with my mom throwing things away because she knew that I wanted these things. Like I wanted to keep this. It was mine.
Mine did too.
And it helped that we only had the Genesis, and the only console that I've ever owned that ended up getting thrown out was an NES that I had for a short amount of time, which goes back to my hoarding electronics. I had a little egg crate thingy that was just full of magnets, And one day my gold cart Zelda and Duck Hunt and Mario got stored in that egg crate, and they never worked again. The NES was still fine, but not having any other games to play, and there were no BIOS or boot screens or anything like that, so we didn't know what was broken and what wasn't, and it just ended up with her throwing them out without asking me. I just came home one day and it was gone. That was the only time she ever got rid of anything. But it helped that I didn't have anything besides that until much later, till I was maybe 14 or 15, was when we really started getting the hand-me-downs and stuff from my cousins. So by that point, it was like, this is my stuff. You can't have it, you know?
Yeah, so it is funny. Because hand-me-downs are like a huge part of why I got into gaming also. But more specifically for me, like, so I got that Super Nintendo, right? But I also got from my uncle, who was doing PC gaming. He gave us Aces of the Pacific. I don't think I've met anyone else ever who's played that.
I know what it is, but I have not played it.
Yeah, it's hilarious. World War II fighting game. And it falls back to what interested my dad, because, you know, my uncle knew he would like that, and I played to Civilization 2 at some point. And that's what got me into PC gaming, was because my uncle just kept handing us games. You know, that you had to boot off of DOS and things like that. And I learned how to use the computer because I wanted to play those games, and my dad had no clue on how to do it. And so I'd have to figure out all the commands, and you'd have to pull up the manual and see. Like, you literally had to type in, we got Steel Panthers, and you had to literally type in Steel Panthers file extension in order to get it to boot. Mm-hmm. And I had to explore for it and everything like that, and figure out how to use it. So that was a huge part of my life, of expanding past the consoles and getting into actually what shaped probably my whole life, was the learning how to use computers, because I wanted to play games. Because consoles are pretty easy. Sort of. Now, when I started. Not the older stuff.
Yeah.
And not when your TVs explode when we try to play.
You don't have any siblings, though, do you, Moose?
No, I'm an only child.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that, you know, I didn't have to share with other people like my parents, or that I was super spoiled, because really wasn't, because we didn't really have a lot. So I was grateful for the things that we did get, but I was also able to maintain control over the things that I was given for the most part. Did have the run-ins, getting lots of toys taken and given away and donated and lost. But my consoles, electronics are all still there, still working somehow. So I'm really happy that I still maintain control over those, and the few games I did manage to collect over the years.
Did you end up with any hand-me-down equipment?
I have an Atari that I'll say I acquired it within the last 5 years. You know, I do have an Atari that I got from my cousin, that I still have not actually been able to make work, because it's just incomplete as a unit itself. I just haven't put the effort into it, because there's no games that I have for it that I really want to must get my hands on. Play this Atari game right now, and I'm like, oh, there's my Xbox One. Let's play that right now instead. Just because you don't have an Xbox One, you don't have to shake your head at me.
Yeah, odd man out.
It's true, you are the odd man out.
PS4.
I do need to pick up a PS4. Xbox One is going to be an example of one that I got pretty close into the start of its life cycle. It wasn't day one, but
yeah, going back to buying things day one. Obviously, back then we were younger and didn't have any money and
reliant on our parents.
Yeah, and it's hard as a kid to justify that kind of expense to them. But nowadays, it's sort of shifted to a very software-based consoles, and you don't want to get things day one, because you don't want that day one bug. You don't want to get a console that you can't play anything on because it's Red Ring of Death or it's done something else, and
PSN Network's under attack.
Right.
Yeah, all that stuff though isn't day one though for consoles. Consoles day one do get buggy, but it's usually games that everybody talks about day one being really a problem. And it's funny because pre-orders fight that, but
so I would have agreed with you maybe for the last generation, the PS3 and the Xbox 360. But I mean, Xbox had day one updates, and the PS4 wasn't safe from that either. I mean, the consoles really have become more than just gaming, and because they're trying to shoehorn all this other stuff in there, it's leaving them open to problems, and it's becoming. I wouldn't buy a game day one nowadays either, though, for the same reason. And back then, there was no the console was set in stone. It was a hardware system, and if there was a problem with it, the only real option is recall. Like you can't push an update. So you're either going to say, well, that's just the way it works, or you're gonna spend all of that money to recall everything, give everyone their money back. And there were problems with the consoles. People just sort of learned to live with them, though. Like the Genesis had a memory problem in the Genesis Model 1 and Model 2. And some games actually, I think one of the Castlevania games, I'm not sure, but some of the games actually took advantage of that memory problem, and you end up with things where some games work on Model 1 and Model 2, but no longer work on Model 3 because they fixed the memory problem.
That's weird.
Yeah. And so you get a lot of weird things like that. There was also the RAM expansion on the N64. Some games required that RAM expansion.
Some could just use it instead of...
Yeah, but there were some games like, I think it was the Donkey Kong 64, where the game actually worked perfectly fine without the RAM expansion pack. The only reason why they included the RAM expansion pack with Donkey Kong 64 was because there was a bug in the game at one point in the game that they could not figure out. But the game doesn't actually need that RAM pack. It was just without that RAM pack, there was this one point in the game that became impassable. And so rather than spend any more time trying to figure that out, whereas nowadays you would just, here's a DLC patch. Here you go.
And also for that time period, pre Nintendo 64 and before, no internet, being able...
That'll live you.
Yeah, but not being able to be used by most people to find out stuff like that. You just generally have no idea when you make that purchase. But
right,
like,
you're relying on Nintendo Power or whatever the Sega one was.
To that.
I did too.
God, Nintendo Power is how I found out about like Banjo-Kazooie. That's the only reason I knew about it. But the PS3, when that one launched too, that was so weird. That whole launch. Because it reminds me of that we were talking about Mode 1, Mode 2, version 1, 2, and 3. Because PS3 basically had all three of those at launch. But the only way you knew the difference between them was not by, unless you knew the whole huge serial number or whatever it was, the 60 gig is able to be backwards compatible, right? And none of the other ones could. It was really strange.
See, the PS3 launch was strange because of the way they were doing the backwards compatibility, but it was also compounded by the fact that they were doing it differently in different countries. Yeah. Where, like, I believe all of them in Europe were backwards compatible. Only the higher end storage were compatible in America, and then in Japan, I don't remember which ones are compatible. I don't know if any of them were. But it was really... On top of that, though, so Europe got hardware compatibility. America got software compatibility. They have a little chip called, I think, the Emotion Engine, which is essentially a full PS1 and PS2 emulator. But it's not an emulator, it's just a full PS1, PS2 in a single chip.
Yeah.
And Europe got the chip. America got the operating system.
So strange. That whole thing. I was actually selling... I was working at Best Buy when the PS3 was launched and in its sales thing. And it was really funny because what we sold it as most of the time, the cheapest Blu-ray player you could buy.
That was what we sold huge selling. That's one of the reasons why PS3 did so well.
Yeah.
It was the cheapest Blu-ray player that you could buy
at the time,
and it played games.
Yeah, and your kids will like it.
On top of being the cheapest Blu-ray player, it was also the best Blu-ray player because it outperformed all of the high-end Blu-ray players in so many regards.
Yeah.
And it continued to do that for a while, though nowadays I don't think that the PS3 or the PS4 are rated the top Blu-ray players anymore, but...
Yeah. I wouldn't know on that, but Yeah, when we were way back when we had that hand-me-down. We had those hand-me-down games, but we also had a hand-me-down PC, which at the time was a really ritzy thing to have. My uncle was doing pretty well for himself at that time, but my dad had 4 kids, and I was the last one. So, yeah, everything was hand-me-down, although all my siblings were sisters, so hand-me-downs got a little weird at times. But it was... That PC probably is what cemented me as being somebody who actually thinks of themselves as a gamer. And because at the time, all my friends would play at a friend's house, or it was usually their dad or somebody who had it, right? And my dad had all of these military games. We had Urban Strike for the Genesis, and Urban Strike and Jungle Strike, which for some reason completely switched which one should have been called which. I don't know if you played those, but Urban Strike starts in the city, and then it ends up in the jungle. Jungle Strike starts in the jungle and ends up, I think, in Washington, D.C. or something. It was completely ridiculous. It's been a while since I played those. That might be a little inaccurate.
When you just playing the games in reverse, you just switch the levels and
I don't know.
play through it backwards?
Yeah, but so all of my games were super militaristic until I played that Zelda game, and that's when, as a kid, I started liking video games more. I literally thought they were for adults. I thought video games were only for adults until I got that, because that's what I saw: F1 races, helicopters, and military. I didn't even realize that they were marketed at kids or anything.
You mentioned friends, and let's talk about that for a little bit. Going over to your friend's house and playing video games is something that I think, at least back when we were young, that was something that everyone did. That was your parents were like, get out of the house. You go out. You go over to your friend's house. I remember,
or have friends come to your house.
Yeah, or you were the popular one. Mm-hmm. I remember doing that. I remember doing that a lot. That was my first console was the Genesis, but the one of my friends had a Atari. He had an Atari, and I remember playing Missile Command, and I remember playing E.T. and some of those other ones on his Atari. Going over to his house, and those were also just great experiences because I only had the one game. Like right. I didn't have a lot of. And going over there and being able to look at that, and I was like, oh my god, this looks really cool, with a simple joystick. And then later on, you get older and you get the Xbox and the Halo LAN parties.
Yes.
Oh, I remember we would set up 4 Xboxes in 4 rooms, and being the nerdy one, I would have Ethernet cable and set them all up, and we didn't have a router or switch, so we would set them all up, and I would hard code IP addresses and all of these things, and just be like, all right, we're gonna Halo it up. And I was terrible at Halo.
I think that's a big difference for me. I had that experience a little bit, and I had one friend growing up who played games. Not totally. Thanks. But I had one friend that I actually played video games with on a regular basis. And he always had way more games than me, and violent games and stuff, right? Whereas I had Banjo-Kazooie or whatever.
Banjo.
Yeah, and Nintendo 64 is probably the biggest time of me playing with other people. But I think my gaming experience growing up, and largely still actually, I have get-togethers with friends online where we'll all get together and play something. I think now we're playing MechWarrior Online or whatever. I very rarely get to control what game we're playing anymore, despite me being the critical one. But I think most of my gaming experience growing up has been largely solo. Yeah, that started with EverQuest for me. When I played that for 6 years, from when I was 1999, so I was 10 years old. I started playing that right before its first expansion, and I played that off and on for probably 10 years. But if you counted the entire time I was playing, until I was 20. Yeah, it's accurate. I was in college, and I still would log in sometimes and play. Mm-hmm. But yeah, most of the time I played. My parents considered gaming really bad for you, and really a dumb thing to do with your time. And so I think I only ever had 1 or 2 games for Nintendo 64. I think I literally had 4 games if you count the 2 that you get when you buy it. Ever. That was how many I had. And Super Nintendo, they never, ever bought a game. But my dad would take me to Blockbuster, and that's how I got to experience all these other games.
Oh, yeah, video rentals.
Yeah. Still exists, but not nearly used as much.
Yeah.
I don't think, at least I know that I don't, really.
It's such a worse experience now, too. Redbox. Ugh.
Does Redbox do games now?
Yeah, they do games.
They've been
done
doing
it
games for a long time. Almost the whole time, I
Yeah.
think, that they've been.
Pretty much. As soon as they saw there was a market for that, they tried games, and that became popular with people. But
You'll rent it, though, but like now it'll be like gross. Like the disc will be gross or scratched or damaged, and the box itself is really disgusting.
I've never had that problem. My
Are
problem
you serious?
my problem was before is not having like the app or looking it up online, just having to go to the Redbox and just be like, oh, they're out. They're out.
Oh yeah, that's also
They're
they're
out.
almost always
They're
out.
out.
Then there's no
Yeah.
selection. There's like 4 games,
Yeah.
so it's yeah. That's an experience that I think only very certain generation of people within like 4 or 5 years of each other really recognize as an event, because that was when 007 came out.
Oh, yeah.
GoldenEye.
GoldenEye.
Yeah, I rented that every week for 3.5 months. That was the only game I rented, and my dad finally just bought it.
You could have purchased it twice.
That's what
probably.
I convinced. That's how I did it. I convinced my dad. I said, "Okay, let's add up how much money we spent." It was like $140 by at that point, or something ridiculous, where we could have bought it like 4 times over.
Yeah. Crazy.
Oh, man.
Crazy. So I remember growing up that I would go over to my neighbor's house. She had an NES, and we'd play games, and our other neighbor, her neighbor, would come over and he would play with us too. We're all within a couple of years of each other, so we were really close growing up, and so that was kind of our
little great gaming group.
little gaming group experience at that time. So we would play. I mean, we didn't play a lot of games, and it wasn't nearly every day or anything, but it was still in our neighborhood that happened a bit, even though it wasn't a great neighborhood.
That might be the difference. I grew up on 2 acres of land, and our neighbors were like farmers.
Oh yeah,
So
that was probably it. We're on quarter-acre lots,
Yeah.
all next to each other, and all the kids were playing in the street, And
Yeah, see, I grew up suburban, so I was in a cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
It was,
you couldn't get away from
Plenty
them
of
without,
people, yeah.
unless you were leaving. You couldn't get away from them.
yeah.
Right. So yeah, we did that. I do remember, and it was the strangest thing, is hardly ever anyone came over to play in my house. I do remember, and this is going to be the strangest thing, and I know you're going to have lots of questions about this. Someone came over and wanted to play games, brought like a stack of NES games and wanted to play games with us. I don't know who that person was. My parents don't know who that person was. But at the time, I convinced them that he needed to come in and play NES games with me. So this stranger kid from the street, mind you, probably double my age or older, some person came over and we played Zelda and we played all these other games. And, it was definitely kind of a question later, like, are you okay? But yeah, it was just one of those things. But that was what we did,
It was
Some
times
people
were
had
different back
games, some
then,
people
though.
had consoles. It was different back then. It was, nothing. We just played games, and I was exposed to like his collection of games, which was awesome. And that was one of the things. We all had games to lend and to bring over to people's house and expose each other to games, and no other kind of exposing each other, just games.
Yeah. You mentioned being exposed to video games, and that's a good way to put it. It's a good point, because Wes was saying that you thought the video games were geared towards adult because you only got to see that small subset of games for so long, whereas me and Miguel here, we were able to play all kinds of games, games that our friends had and we had.
And I didn't see a lot of the other games like that, tactical games or military games. Violent games, yes, but they're either cartoon violence or just games that were just
like
ubiquitous to the entire generation of gamers, which is just like
Right.
regular fighting games.
the
More
silly-
Clay Fighter.
Yeah.
the silly violence of general chaos.
Clay Fighter,
Oh, Clay Fighter,
stuff like
I
that.
never played Clay Fighter.
You should.
yeah.
I know. Well,
You need to play some games here.
It's funny because I talked to a lot
be
of
your
people.
friends. We'll expose you for you.
Well, like on 64, there's only like 160 games or so. There's actually not a really huge catalog.
It's not a huge catalog, right?
And I mean, American games. Obviously, in Japan, there's going to be
Sure, yeah.
300 extras. But when you go through it, even on that subsect, most of the games that I chose, I feel like the games that I chose, and I still choose military and simulation and games like that. Now I have a gaming group that I do where we literally have ranks and things. But I think that's interesting to point out because I think all the time I've always had a different kind of idea of what games I wanted to play and how seriously I wanted the game to take itself and things like that. Because I wasn't exposed to that cartoonish stuff, which is actually kind of amusing if you knew me at all when I was like 15 years and younger, because I had extreme ADHD. I was just literally bounced off the walls all day long, all the time. But I could sit down for these military simulation games and go full focus mode. Mm-hmm. And I played Civilization and just would beat the crud out of my dad on it. Or I was like a better ace fighter pilot than he was in the game, where he was like, oh, I'm so good at this. And then I'd like wreck his scores and stuff. And he stopped playing with me for 007 because once we bought it, especially because I learned how to circle strafe and he couldn't figure that out. And he was just mad because he'd lose every single time. And that was my dad's exit of gaming. Because he was the one who played before me. But like, did you play Space Station Silicon Valley? Do you know that one?
No, I don't think so.
64.
No.
See, that's one of my. Now that is a goofy one, but it's it's a game where you jump into different animals' bodies as a chip guy, and they're all robot animals. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of open level worlds, and you just have objectives in each one. And that is my favorite 64 game, and that's another one. I never meet anyone who loved that game.
We're gonna have to look up and play. That sounds like something that would be right up your alley.
It sounds interesting.
It's really good. You can't emulate it either. There's not enough. I mean, you can, but it's awful. It's got 2D sprites and 3D as well at the same time, and whoever does the emulators, nobody's like tuned it well enough where you can play it. Because you either can't see half the 3D models, or the view distance just goes to crud after like 10 feet out, or you can see nothing that's 2D, meaning you can't collect anything because you'd have to memorize where it is. So it's been disappointing because I haven't been able to get my hands on that, because now it's like $100 online or something.
You should look at I think it's called Dolphin Emu, which is they've taken over a lot of the Nintendo emulators, and they're pretty good. I like that they do a state of the emulator address every year, or I think every month, where they just highlight in great technical detail the bugs that they fixed and how they fix them and stuff. Like they fixed one of the problems with the timing on F-Zero, where if the physics wasn't exactly right for one of the float calculations, you would just fly through the ramps. And it's great, but you should check them out because they have been making a lot of progress in getting weird, obscure things like that.
That's interesting. I'll have to look them up. I think Project 64 is the last one I ever looked at, and that's like not been updated in 4 years or something.
I don't know if they do Nintendo 64. I know that they do GameCube and Wii
Dolphin,
and Wii U.
Nice.
But I think that they've started covering more, so you should check them out. Yeah, let's.
One thing that you did mention I wanted to chime in on was video game rentals.
Yes,
I remember being able to go to a grocery store, and attached to the grocery store was a video rental and game rental, and it was like in the grocery store itself.
Yeah.
And it was separate. You'd have to pay for it there, but it was still like
attached
to it. Like the pharmacy would be attached to it or something. You could just get that there too. And I remember renting NES games there and even Genesis games there for a while. Later, like our video rental store here in town, actually at one point was renting PC games, which was a huge mistake when games didn't actually require the disc to run once they were installed. So I remember getting a lot of games I was actually able to play, after that. So I just remember that, the ability of the renters and these businesses to actually understand the market. The market's changing so much and they couldn't actually keep up with it. The idea that rental was a thing that you could do was smart for a period of time when it's cartridge based, and now everything's so digital. We're half and half. Although the games and the industry's caught up with DRM and other issues that they have to get around to deal with that. But I remember, Dreamcast games. Like, how many games did you actually own that were purchased versus disclaimer: don't go do anything illegal, but burned games that you had. Because I know that my collection is a bunch of blank discs.
I wasn't lucky enough to know that you could burn games for the Dreamcast until long after.
I always wanted.
So all of my Dreamcast games were legit.
I did
didn't
buy a
know that
lot of
until now.
Dreamcast games. I didn't realize it was a possibility until someone at school said, "Hey, do you want a bunch of burned Dreamcast games?" I was like, I didn't know that was a thing, and he just gave me a stack. He's like, "I don't need these anymore. Here's this, and here's a boot disc. The ones that are starred require the boot disc. The other ones will run just without it."
That's how I got Warcraft 3. Some dude at school just had a stack and just handed them out. And you're like, dude, don't you like this game? He's like, I love this game. That's why I want everyone to play it. And you're like, shouldn't you get people to buy it then or something? And I never did. I barely played it, actually, at the time. But,
I played it. I remember playing Warcraft 3.
yeah.
Yeah, man. DRM efforts in both console and PC games is such a...
It's a funny subject.
Yeah, it's such a wide and varied subject too. We could do an entire episode, and we probably will at some point do an entire episode on that.
Copyright and DRM.
Yeah, I'll save that. Last thing I want to say on the rental. There's still a grocery store that does rentals here.
Really?
Not here.
In this state.
Yeah, in this state, in Bulverde. It's I think it's the HEB.
Okay, so it was HEB. Like
Right,
I was avoiding that for.
I was so weirded out because I went there. I got married out there, and I went to that HEB, and I went to the back, and it had like blue posters with white text that looked super 90s. That I was like, whoa, where am I? Like, what? You have games for rental here? What
were they renting?
Mostly 360 games, despite the Xbox One having been out for many months at that, maybe even a year at that point. But it was like almost entirely 360
I thought you were going to say mostly SNES games.
That'd be hilarious.
That would have been great because I can go and rent like Turtles in Time or something. I'd be down.
I kind of would be down for a retro, if Game Over Video Games decided to have a rental section also, I would be so down.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
It is funny because now it's like, if you think of that idea, you like can't trust people to do that, right? Like Redbox, and I was talking about, people just treat it all like junk. But I think that's interesting because it's general public now, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of specialized public, where you kind of could trust people to respect things that they rent, and now it's you only see that in like tool shops and stuff. They'll still do it, but then you have to pay for the freaking tool if you break it. So yeah, it's a little crazy.
But yeah, I mean, just I don't know. I still see. I know you can still rent games, but I don't know if I want to go and rent like an Xbox One game.
Yeah, me neither.
Because half of my first day of that rental is going to be installing
updates.
Install the game. You have to wait forever for that. I don't care what it is. It's going to take forever to install the game, and then like, okay, I'm going to play now. Start, and it's like, oh, a required update. And if that game's been out for a while, there might be a long wait to finish that. And so
renting nowadays is a lot more of a hassle. On top of having to install it and then do the updates, when you're done, you can't just return the disc and be like, all right, I'm done with this game forever. You've now got 600 gigabytes or whatever on your console hard drive taking up space that you've got to go back through and now remove it.
Ugh.
Well, I mean, you can just say remove and it'll be like, okay, fine. That's not nearly as much of a process, but it is something to consider.
It's actually just really annoying. My PS3...
the ones that I've uninstalled haven't been an issue.
Oh, no. My PS3 is full 100% of the time, and Katie and I have to trade off what game we're going to play. And if we don't play, if we haven't played a game in a week, it has to be deleted off there if the other person has. And at one point, like The Last of Us took up so much space. And the main problem is actually the operating system has had so many updates that it takes up half the hard drive now.
Yeah.
Of course, it's easy enough to just swap in a new one now, which I should have done 3 years ago.
A long time ago.
But it actually is awful. I can't I can't pop in a new game. I have to decide if I want to wait almost 20 minutes to install the other game again just to play this one to see if I want to play it. It's like an issue. There really is for me. I dealt with this last week.
Yeah. Whereas back in the day, all you had to worry about was, I've got 2 memory cards. Which one do I use? And that was it.
That's only like PS1 era and up. Before that, you were just like, blunk on.
Right.
My save data, yay.
Yeah.
I didn't corrupt it by resetting it like it told me not to. So, yeah. What was the thing you were going to change to?
So next up, I was going to talk about what kind of impact do you feel that the gaming, growing up with the games that you did, had on your life?
Well, the funny part about all 3 of us here is we all met at the same company, right? You met Miguel at the company? And the whole reason I had any of those skills or interested in tech support at all is because I grew up with PC games. And I learned how to program behind them because I wanted to design games. And I went and got my college degree in computer animation. And that's not worked out great yet. But, that's what I'm trying to do now, is get in an industry. So it's probably shaped my entire life. Mine might be one of the most severe impacts because I've decided that I can ramble on for hours about how much I think games will shape the future.
Do you feel that there was a point in your life where that became it just sort of it hit you, and that was what you wanted to do? That was the games were started. Was there a point in your life where the game started driving your life, basically? Like, where you started saying, I want to do this because of games, and I want to do this because of games? Or was it sort of a gradual thing where you just sort of grew up and they were there just sort of subtly in the background influencing you?
So, I played Star Wars Galaxies when I was 17, maybe. I had stopped EverQuest for a while and I played Star Wars Galaxies, and I met some people on there who were all adults. And I joined their guild, and I was literally the youngest member. None of them knew that. They always treated me like a much older person. I never was part of that group of online Xbox Live streamers saying all kinds of incendiary stuff. That was never for me, really. But I met them, and I talked to them. I talked to them about the real life, and they told me how important this game was to them, and how all the people they've met have become important to them. And it was the first time, my parents kind of were like, none of this stuff matters in the real world. None of this has any impact. And I believed them for a large part of that. But then at that point, I started realizing how much these games had impact on me. I gained managerial skills through managing guilds on MMOs. That's literally where my skill set came from. And I became a manager at our company and applied those skills directly. It literally was almost the same thing. I won't go into how ours is set up, but managing online people, it's a thing. But when it came time for college, I wasn't a bad student, but I was a very unmotivated student. If something caught my interest, A+, I was gonna wreck that assignment, and I did, commonly enough. I went to like a magnet school, and was fourth quarter bottom 10 people, I think, in terms of GPA. But came time for college, and I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with my life. And my parents were like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, man, all I can think about is games. And not even in that idea that I just want to sit there and play games. I never had that idea. It makes me a little sad when I hear people say, I just want to play video games for a living. I want to become a video game tester. And I'm always like, oh, no. I wanted to make them.
You want to be the guy. Everyone wants to be the cool guy from Grandma's Boy.
Yeah. So
that guy was cool.
So yeah, that didn't interest me, and I never wanted to be the video game tester. I wanted to be the one who's making the decisions about what's.
You want to be robot legs.
But yeah, it's had a pretty huge impact. I mean, now I've quit my job to try to take my hand at making my own games and doing something for them. and now on your videos. Yes.
How about you, Moose? What sort of impact would you say that gaming has had on your life? And is there a moment where like gaming sort of changed the course of your life?
Gaming changing my life. Gaming was definitely probably one of the things that we congregated around the most when I was growing up. I think a lot of my social circles were defined by gaming. Because I knew plenty of people who were non-gamers. I knew plenty of people who were gamers who didn't play anything close to what I did, and I wasn't really ever terribly close with people like that. So I think a lot of that came from that. I just remember growing up, I can't remember a time that I wasn't in front of a computer of some sort, whether it was a gaming console or just a PC or something. My earliest memories in school are of sitting at a computer, pushing a 5 1/4 inch floppy disk into a drive, pushing the button down, and typing into some sort of command prompt, to run the program and then play whatever Math Blaster, typing something or other that pop up. So gaming's always been there. Computers have always been there. But yeah, a lot of the focus, was, my social group revolves around people who played the same games, had the same interests, wanted to get together and do that exact same thing. So I think a lot of my longest lasting contacts now are kind of built around that. Even friends I made in college, the ones that I get along with the most and still talk to the most are the ones that I spent, weekends, after school or outside of school just playing games. So that's the social aspect that gaming has had in my life, because it's just something that's so ingrained in what we do. Outside of that, I mean, I pursued going into studying music business. It was my other hobby and passion was music in general. So that was never really kind of music or a video game focused. It didn't mean that afterwards I didn't all of a sudden be like, hey, I want to start playing around and make some chiptune music and try to do, video game sounds and stuff like that. So everything kind of comes full circle with it. I don't know if I can pinpoint, a specific point in time where video gaming's changed things, completely altered for me. It just kind of seems like it's always been there. So life's just always kind of gravitated around
sort of been a subtle culture. Guiding hand.
Yeah, just kind of just drifted along with it and let that current take me with it. So
you talk about being in front of the computers most of your life in computer gaming, and I think that's really where gaming hit me as well. My mom used to work in a sort of computer warehouse. I say warehouse. It was a small sort of like garage building where they would build computers for businesses and people. And we got one of those computers, and it had DOS and Windows 3.1. And I remember the DOS games that I used to play on that. And that sort of led me to making batch scripts and little DOS scripts on that old computer. And I think that's really where it sort of all began. And then a few years later, StarCraft with the Battle.net online play, making things like bots, chat bots, and things like that was really popular for a while. And I used to started out making little scripts and stuff for a program called StealthBot, which was a Battle.net bot, and then moving on to learning to make my own bots in languages that if the internet knew I was using would very, very be disappointed. But that's not really gaming, but it is at the same time. It's a community around gaming, and I think that's really what drove me into my career now as a software engineer, and part of the reason why I love making sort of reverse engineered integration stuff, making network protocols work, and making two programming languages and two tools that really shouldn't be talking together start talking, and working through that Battle.net system really motivated me to learn all of that.
Yeah, I think I was remembering a lot of stuff while you guys were talking too, because remember I had like my best friend growing up. He his fate has kind of always had been tied to mine because my dad and his were partners in their practice. But yeah, he's the one who showed me EverQuest. He's the one who showed me Star Wars Galaxies because his dad was way into gaming. Even had in his office a computer with EverQuest on it, and he was the only one who did. But it was. I actually went to the same college as him, and met a bunch of people as well, who I hang out with, and we hung out because of games. And I actually had a nice callback, and actually something I never really had when you're talking about the LAN parties and things like that, because we had a bunch of stuff like that with Street Fighter 4 when that came out. We actually went over and hung out and had like 8 people in a room playing, and it was a really good time. That was something I never really had been involved with before, and I'm so bad at fighting games that I was not able to participate that much in it, but it was fun being involved in that. My wife also played games, and she was, for us growing up, we're all guys, and we still had social stigma, I did, at least, with gaming and it being useless and nerdy and things like that. I wore huge glasses up until I was about 16, and somehow my eyes corrected themselves.
Lucky you.
Yeah, I know, really. But I may be blind by the time I'm 60. Who knows? But it was always associated with this nerdy thing. For girls, it was even more so. They faced as much as that, and it was like, oh, video games are for boys. Look at Mortal Kombat, and things like that. And Katie played a whole bunch of those. And I'm trying to remember. We played Smash Brothers, Melee, so much, and Guitar Hero, which I actually played guitar at that time, and then I played more Guitar Hero than real guitar. Man, if only I had played real guitar instead, I could have been so much better at it. But because I was like expert level in Guitar Hero, but we played that from 16 on to 18 because I was friends with her long before I dated her, and we played those games, and I never judged her on that or anything like that. Always, enjoyed playing that. And then the Wii was coming out, and she really, really wanted it, and I didn't. But she brought me over for a party for the release of that, and we went out and got the Wii, and came back, and I was the only one who played it because none of them could stay up as late as I could, because I used to have to sneak out of my room to the computer room to play EverQuest at night, so I've always stayed up till like 3 a.m, and then gotten up to go to school the next day. That's like always been a part of my life as long as I can remember, sneaking and staying up. So gaming is like guilty to me a lot of the times.
It's your guilty pleasure,
right? Well, but then like when I played with Katie, it didn't feel like that anymore. Yeah, we got the Wii, and we shared interest, and even now, whenever we live apart right now thanks to jobs and things like that, but whenever we get together, we play these games. We have a great time playing them together, usually single player games that we just both have a really great time trading off the controller to. That's probably a lot more of my experience rather than multiplayer games. Is handing the controller off is a big thing that doesn't go around as much.
We did it. We played Final Fantasy VII that way. We'd all sit together and pass it off, and just take turns doing that. Play it all in one sitting. We definitely did the play and pass.
Yeah. See, I was more of a backseat gamer. I would watch.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, sometimes that would happen too. It's like 2 people will be playing, and a couple people will just be there watching, because sometimes you can't just get everyone in all the time. So. Well,
and Katie's like that. She loves to spectate and dictate, and I've got the Twitch skills or whatever to get whatever needs done. So it's
early version of Let's Plays.
Yeah.
Watch your friends play something.
Live Let's Plays.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, that's that. I remember that's how most of my gaming career has gone. Is me watching my cousin play. I was never particularly good at video games, but he could get through platformers. He could get through all of those puzzles pretty quickly. but I was smart, and so I would backseat game for things like the RPGs, Final Fantasy VII, and those, and sort of guide him, and he would go through and do the battling and all that other stuff, and that was always I didn't feel like I was being cheated or missing out or anything, because I felt like I was still there. I was still enjoying the game, even though I was not controlling the character.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing to me. I'm usually on the other side of that. I'm usually the one with the controller, and I feel bad, and I'll try to hand it off whenever I can.
Yeah, my cousin didn't do that.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have people that, like, my sisters were completely uninterested and way older than me anyways, and then I didn't have people come over that often, so I didn't get the chance to share that much. So instead of being like, I feel like that's a thing too, when you have like competition, you're much more like, no, this is mine, because you had to be, right? And I didn't, so I always be like, somebody to hand it off to. But one game that reminded me of is Shogun 2 on the PC, which came out 2012. Total War series game, very strategic, but it had a co-op campaign that had, it's basically a military conquering game where you have overarching strategy where you need to figure out your resources and your political parties and your daughter's marriage, and oh god, I just couldn't care less. I win that game by being the most ridiculous tactical master that I could be, and I am very good at that game. I played like 15 online games at its heyday and just kept going rank up, and I never lost.
If we've proved anything from the previous 24-hour Extra Life, it's that you're good at too many games.
Yes, that's true. I'm good at many games, but in this one,
at the very least, much better at games than any of us.
Yes.
So
I got you a Crazy Taxi.
Yeah, you did.
I really thought I was going to win that one. I feel disappointed that I did.
Katie did really well in that one too.
She did.
Yeah.
But so for that one, the co-op campaign was really interesting because I would let Katie manage the finances. I would let Katie manage the political things, and oh god, the family stuff. Have at. I have a daughter. I don't even know. She'll deal with all of them. Like, she can't fight because the game won't let her, so I don't care that she exists. Which is kind of archetypal Japanese feudal era stuff, anyways. But then we would get in these battles, and it'd be 3-1 odds, and Katie's getting attacked, and I'd be like, no, give me command of all of your troops, and then I will win it by a hair's breadth, and I'll be able to pull these victories out of nowhere. And that game, and she'll be able to keep me funded and managed and not in revolt and things like that. And that was something that actually made me really think that I really wanted to marry her. I know that sounds weird, but it's because there was this thing that we worked so well together at, and we both were having such a good time at, that I was being pushed to marry her anyways at that point by all kinds of social factors, because we've been dating for like a billion years or whatever. But that was an interesting thing that kind of confirmed it for me, because we had a compatible set of skills and enough trust in each other to do things, because that kind of thing really applies to greater life, right? I'm decent at finances, but I'm actually really good at making things work with minimal resources. And she's good at planning it so you don't have to. And so I don't know, it was just very interesting that kind of fell together like that. So I'd say gaming, even outside of my career path, has had a significant impact on the person I chose to be with, the person that I became. I'd say it's all thanks to that. So yeah.
I want to go back here for a second and talk about communities, gaming communities. You mentioned that you were with what was that, Star Wars
Galaxies
community, and that's where you met a lot of your contacts and stuff that got you started on wanting to do your career path, right?
No, that's where I got started with gaining just weird leadership skills.
That's it, yeah.
that came into application in ways I didn't think would imagine. The Ghost Hunters was our guild. I started off just as a new member of that guild and the youngest one by far, and ended up being, you actually had to manage a town, you had to manage events, you had to get people together. There's a million different professions. You have to make sure they all have some place to go. I had to manage inventory for the raids and things like that. And I just I used spreadsheets. I talked to people, I signed people tasks, made sure that they knew what they were on, chewed them out if they didn't get those tasks right. I was like 16 at the time, sitting here ordering 30-year-olds and being like, why couldn't you update this sheet with what your current inventory is? I mean, it takes 5 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, Varanish, it's no. And, it was weird. And then I didn't think about that ever again until I became an actual manager. And I was like, wow, this is exactly the same.
So, speaking about communities, do you feel were there any aside from that community, were there any other communities that either of you were a part of, gaming communities that really left a mark?
You joined any online? Do MMOs, anything like that?
Even local, not just necessarily MMOs, but just gaming groups, gaming communities that you've been in.
We had an anime group in high school, but they were more anime than video games, so I dropped out.
Yeah, I mean,
they were like only DDR. That's like all I cared about.
We did games with our anime club. We hosted video game tournaments on our campus and stuff like that, and they all played games.
We couldn't do that.
They let us do whatever. It didn't really matter as long as our club sponsor approved it. Then cool. University was cool with that too. My group there, like some friends who were in that group, also we would get together and game fairly regularly at a friend's house, and just sit there. And that was literally Halo LAN party. 2 or 3 Xboxes in a house, just going at it. That was a pretty regular event for us for a while. But I don't know if I had any of the structure or impact that your group had. So that was really literally just us goofing around each weekend because, what else are you going to do? You're not going to do your homework for college. You're going to goof around.
Yeah. Yeah, mine was... I had a lot of online groups that I've been a part of. I just a few months ago joined another new one that I've been really interested in for a long time and finally decided I had time for. But their average age is like 34 or something like that. I always join much older groups for whatever reason.
It's not that much older.
Much hugely older. Almost dead, really. But older than me anyways. I had America's Army was a group I joined. That not a group, that's a video game that the Army put out for free, which was really weird.
Look at how fun and interesting the Army is.
It was actually that's one of my favorite shooting games.
It was a really good game.
Yeah,
it was not reflective of actual
army. No, yeah, definitely not. Especially because it's even multiplayer. You have like a 50% chance of dying. What are they trying to tell you?
Right.
Like, this is awful. You're gonna get shot in the head from halfway across a thing by some guy doing 360s and screaming YOLO. But but I joined a group for that, a tactical group. And there again, I did squad leading. A lot of times micromanaging people, which I think I'm better at than macromanaging. I think I'm actually really awful at macromanaging. But getting people motivated and telling them what to do without making them feel like they're dumb is maybe a skill I have. But I did that, and then I joined a couple guilds in EverQuest, but those never really stuck. And I'm sure there's other ones I'm forgetting. But
so you mentioned earlier that you didn't have a lot of friends that you could play with growing up. Do you feel these communities were they an adequate supplement for that? Or by the time you were in these communities, was it beyond that point where you didn't need to supplement that because you had other...
Right. It's hard to say. I definitely joined them because I felt like I was missing something. But like in high school, I had a bunch of friends, but most of them and many of them played games, but very few of them played my games. And I learned in college, screw it, play their games. And that's still my current motto. I don't like MechWarrior Online. I hate MOBAs. I played Dota 2 for 2 years, and I hate that game. I got very good at it, but it was like being very good at something you hate. Like, and eventually I had to quit because people, including my friends, would just be so venomous on that game that I really didn't want to play with them anymore on that. But now we play other things. So I have like a little bit of control, but it's like ultimate veto, where I have to use my black ball once every like 2 years to be like, we're never playing this again, and we'll move on. But I do think I joined those communities because I felt like I was missing something. And now that I'm out of college, and now that I don't have a job that I go to every day to talk to people, it did feel like I was missing something again, and that's why I joined another one. When I was in high school and playing Star Wars Galaxies, I also became a millionaire in that game because I learned how to... I really wish I had sold it. I would have made a couple $1,000s if I had sold that account and all its resources. But I learned how to do rare item trading and kind of talk and barter with people and get them to purchase things high, and I would purchase from them low for other people without making them think I was a jerk. I'd be like, oh, you're in this situation and I'll get you this, or I'd trade different items and trade on up and things like that. And I actually, at my height of my nerdiness in computer science AP 2, I would sit there and create programs that would track what I estimated to be trends in the economy, and I would write them down, and I would talk to my friends about it and try to pitch them on how to purchase things or things like that and see what felt weird. And it was really funny because my friends really, at that time, at least they humored me. A lot of the times, Mason and Alfred and all of them, and they were always really interested in my stories of that game, but they never played with me most of the time because they didn't have a computer that could do it. And so that was always really, I think that's an interesting part of my life, because talking to people about games like I am now is almost ubiquitous with me having played them. It seems like that's how I communicate. That's my community with gamers, is talking about the games, not
the shared experience.
Not even, well, because like you didn't play Star Wars Galaxies, and neither did you.
But I feel like I did now.
Right? Well, yeah. but I can talk to you about it and exchange information, interesting ideas, and experiences without having played it. And I love hearing that from other people too, their experiences with games, and this whole thing we're doing here, because that's kind of the community aspect of it for me, rather than having actually played it at the same time as them.
So, Miguel, you didn't really do a whole lot of that online communities or large community groups like that. Do you feel like you missed out on anything?
I've always felt that I was behind the curve on a lot of gaming and gaming experiences without having a strong community. It was just with my friends, and it was literally the few things that we had between us. So yeah, I think that I probably didn't get that full community experience that a lot of gamers have and share, just because I didn't really get a great experience online or actually get into online gaming until much, much later than everyone else. So yeah, there's probably something missing, to a degree at that point. Now, online multiplayer gaming and those communities, that's the only way to play. Like,
right.
I don't get to play with you that often, though. That always felt like something that I was missing out playing with you, because we tried Destiny for like a day, and then we couldn't. Yeah, I hate that game.
I love to hate that game, and I hate to love that game. There are things about it that I really like, in small doses.
Well, that's an example of something that I wanted to play. You wanted to play that, and somebody else wanted to play it too, who bought it for me. I played with both of them maybe 3 times, but yeah, that's an example of kind of one of those times that I did that.
But that's interesting because that's kind of like a shift in the community because we know each other. We can play games together. We can do things together. But I play Destiny with other people way more often than I actually ended up playing with you.
Yeah.
And I didn't play with them all that often either. So, yeah, I know. I think that I was a little bit behind in all of that, and so I didn't really have that same experience. I was definitely a single-player game or a side-by-side player for a long time for a lot of things. And so I think that translates over into like the games that I play, now. Like the most recent purchase I got was Party Hard. That's a single-player, game. You can.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
That's your neighbors are keeping you awake, so you have to sneak over and murder everyone.
I almost bought that when my neighbors were being loud because it just kind of coincidentally I was reading that at the same time and I was like,
this
hey.
release. I need this in my life.
Yeah.
So a lot of the games I do a lot of puzzle games and point and click adventure stuff. Lots of super single player stuff, and part of that was I still like the multiplayer games, but I spent a lot of my childhood alone just because I'm a single child. I didn't always have someone there, need to play with someone else because someone else is also there.
Yeah.
So I didn't gravitate towards that community thing until I just happened to be like, oh, my friends also do this thing, and so now we do it together. So I don't have that same gaming community connection that you guys have had when I was growing up or when I was playing. Or even now as an adult, it's very limited and much smaller, I think, than other people who play lots and lots of online games, even though I will get on and play multiplayer FPS or whatever it might be online. Definitely probably missed out because I just don't do MMOs in general. I tried it. I played Final Fantasy 11 for like a month and a half, something like that.
I couldn't handle 11.
My cousin loved 11.
I enjoyed that game because that group of friends that I had in college were playing it.
Yeah.
And there was that community.
Yeah.
It was like we got to talk about the game, we got to play together and party and raid and power level, and it was fun. Then I came home, didn't have a broadband connection, tried it once over dial-up to see what would happen, and stopped playing.
I played EverQuest on dial-up for years, and I just didn't know better. But it was literally 10 to 15 minutes to load into a new zone.
You would just sit there and wait for it.
Yeah, and there was a boat that went around, and when the new expansion came back, I also didn't have enough RAM to load it fast enough, including the connection, and it had to do one and then the other. And the boat would be back in the back zone by the time I loaded in, and so I literally couldn't, I couldn't move until we upgraded either the internet or the computer. And I had to quit until we got a better connection, which was like 6 months later.
Oh, man.
I played WoW for all of 7 minutes probably.
That's what's funny when I talk about MMOs with a lot of people, which could be a whole nother topic. But I never seem to play the ones that people who define their gaming habits as MMO style, because I wouldn't define mine as that. But I never seemed to play. I never got into WoW. Final Fantasy 15 was a big one recently.
Is 14?
14.
Yeah.
14. Yeah, that was...
15's the new one that's coming out.
Right. Oh, yeah, with the Dude Bros.
Dude Bros.
The road trip. Katie is so excited for that. It's the most hilarious thing ever. That's like right up her alley. But, yeah, what about you, Brandon? Have you been part of online groups versus in-person groups, or what?
So, I didn't really have any friends growing up either. The majority of my gaming experiences was me and my cousin. But I didn't really join any online communities either until StarCraft to the BattleNet, like we mentioned earlier. And I was on that for a long... I was on that even when I first started at the company we work at. I used to load up one of my bots and sit in the chat channels and just chat with people. I was never good at StarCraft. I was terrible at StarCraft. In Warcraft, I like to play the custom maps, and I would play a little bit, but I was there for the chat channels and the community there, and not for the game. I definitely feel like that was a very positive experience in my life, though. It's always fun dealing with the trolls and the wars and the battles. There was always clan battles going on between botters, and it was always something interesting to go through it. And on top of that, it was constantly changing too. So I would be in one clan 1 month, and then something would happen, and there was some battle or whatever, and either clan would go away, and then I'd find another clan and a whole new group of people and a whole new hierarchy to learn and all that other stuff. 'Cause they all sort of had their own little hierarchy. Some of them were military ranks, some of them were Warcraft ranks, and all that other stuff. It was interesting. It was fun. I wouldn't trade it. But I didn't really get into we were talking about MMOs here. I didn't really get into MMOs either. My cousin was really into Final Fantasy XI, and I gave that a try for a little while. It's just not. It doesn't feel like my style of gameplay. And almost all of them are that third person, click and macro style. I did get into a few sort of more cartoony style ones. There was one called Fly for Free. That was pretty fun. I used to go on the Korean version though, because
you're a hardcore gamer.
they didn't have encryption on their connection, so I could actually try and reverse engineer that one and make bots for it. And then there was, I think it was Maple Story was another one that I would play for a little while.
I played that
And those style of games, I used to just search around and find that style of thing, and I would try it. I would get on for, a month or two, and then eventually I would get back to, it's just not doing it for me. Yeah, I think Diablo is probably my favorite of that style, though.
Making bots is such an interesting idea too, because the closest I came was in Star Wars Galaxies. It had a built-in macro system where you could do like /dance1, pause 5 seconds, /dance2, recall the macro to make it recursive, or you could call other macros within it, and you could get kind of complicated. And I was programming at that time, so it was easy. But I think that's the max I ever went into that, and I don't know. I know a bunch of people who do bots and things like that and really find a lot of personal... And it's interesting because that's outside of the parameters of the game, right? And that's even like messing with them.
Yeah, and like I wouldn't try and make like, just cheating bots and stuff like that. Right, but I like to try and make my own basically my own game client, so I could just load it up and I don't know. Like I wasn't trying to do anything sneaky or anything. I wanted to know how it worked, and that was really driving that curiosity to become a programmer for me, was how does this game work, and how does it know where the players are and all that other stuff, and that's what I wanted to know. So not really a bot so much as just something that lists everything and tells me everything.
Lays it all out for you in an easy to understand way. That's hard to do.
Yeah.
I actually submitted my StarCraft bot to my boss as my portfolio when I applied.
That's funny.
And he looked at it and was like, "I don't know what this is."
You're like, okay.
Yeah.
Trust me, it's good.
Trust me, it's real impressive.
Yeah. Back in the
this
day.
got me banned.
Gosh, Tim could go on and on for that. Tim has it like an addiction, though. He can't stop making bots. He's made bots for like 90 games at this point.
Yeah. So I wanted to segue into gaming now.
Can I jump in here? Because I did want to ask everyone a question based on this last one. Because we're talking about the impact that gaming had in our life. It's not so much as impact, but a lot of things that happen to us in gaming just kind of stand out. So this might not even be profound, but I wanted to ask everyone's like favorite gaming moment. Like whatever like sticks out as
your
being
memorable moments in gaming.
memorable moments. And it doesn't have to be something that's like, oh wow, this is what gaming means to me. Just that story that you remember as being that one thing that's just kind of like, if you think about, why you enjoy it or what you enjoyed the most about it, what was that one that stood out from any point in time.
I'd have to chew on that for a while.
Yeah, it might be something you might want to have to think about. But I know that I can pick out. I can probably pick out a couple, but I know one that sticks out in my mind.
Well, so for me, it's the Genesis, and there's a few for me as well. I mean, me and my mom used to stay up, and play through Sonic the Hedgehog until that one night we finally beat Sonic the Hedgehog 2. But I think really it's just that collection of moments of bringing the Genesis out into the living room, setting it up, early morning Saturdays, and Toe Jam and Earl. We would just put Toe Jam and Earl in. We would play through it, and my mom would be switching back and forth, and someone would be making breakfast or whatever, and we would just do that every Saturday morning for a while. Toe Jam and Earl, we would do Sonic the Hedgehog 2, we would do I'm sure there were plenty of others, but those are the two that really stood out to me. And it's just, it was a happier time, simpler, happier time, being however old you are when that happens.
What's funny for me is I thought of the complete opposite of the time. Yeah, sorry.
Couldn't be any more different.
Oh, right. Yes, the time I spent locked in a closet.
No, but it
putting
was...
the game away.
This was, so for one, this was when I was like 13, 14, and so, that's a great time to be a boy anyways, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great time.
Great, in quotes.
Yeah.
You have no idea what's going on or why. But my parents also, my sister had moved out, my last one, and we were moving to this $1 million home that my dad built because now finally all the kids were gone and not in college and actually had money that sustaining 4 kids normally drains. Now it's just down to 1. And so we all of a sudden, like, our level of living went really high up, but for whatever reason that caused a lot of friction in my family. And my parents were, I wouldn't say, anything necessarily that bad about them, but they were spending a lot of time apart and very little time with me. And I would play America's Army 2.0 and put on Cake. And
the best band.
Yeah. And at the same time,
he wouldn't wear Cake.
Yeah, I wouldn't wear Cake.
Put on Cake.
Put on the Cake. Yeah, the band. And I would super zen out. And I was very good at America's Army. Like, I don't like, I guess I do it anyways, but I say I don't like to brag about my gaming skills and things like that, but I think there was no game I was better at than America's Army. I knew how to manipulate people. I knew how to make them think, I'd do things like throw a smart grenade against a wall so that they heard the tink noise and think it was a real grenade, and that would route them into the left where I would be already hiding in a window and shoot them when they came through. Plays like that. I was very good at. And I was a good quick shot in it anyways. And I would zone out, and I'd come home from the bus, boot it up, and play for 5 hours. And Dad would come home, say hello. I wouldn't see him again for 3 hours, and then maybe dinner was by myself. If nobody had called me for dinner by then, I'd realize I was on my own, get dinner, and then play deep into the night. And I just have this zen out of like 6 hours of playing this game at a time. And eventually I took that away, and then I got Animal Crossing. And I had that moment too. And it sounds really negative, but honestly, I didn't focus on the negativity of the situation. It didn't really get to me because I just would refuse to pay attention even though I knew it was going on. And that's where that really helped me.
It was your escapism.
It was, and I don't like video games being classified as an escape, But that was a time in my life where it really, I felt like, helped me from becoming maybe, I don't know, I'm pretty cynical anyways, but becoming a lot more negative than I necessarily could have been. I could have been a much angrier person because of it. What's yours?
So the
Bring us back up.
yeah, that was I have some I have some levity. So this will seg well. The anime group that I was with in college, we would throw our whole video game competitions. And so for one of our promotional events, we got space on the front patio of our student activity center, set up a big TV there, and we were playing Soul Calibur 3. Soul Calibur 3 was the first in the series that had the create a character option, and you had a lot of customability for the characters themselves. You could actually get a pretty generic or a pretty general idea of what you're going for and see yourself in the game or someone you knew. So one of our friends had created two of our favorite professors, who were the chair for our club administrator for the anime club, and the co-chair for that, who they did film studies together. He would every other year do like anime film classes. She would do Harrison Ford classes, and they kind of ran that stuff together and were our chairs for that. And so Professor McKay did the Harrison Ford stuff, and she's super Indiana Jones fan. And Professor Farge, who's a Catholic priest at the Catholic university I went to, was also our Japanese studies professor and admin of the anime club. Well, we had created their characters in the game, and of course, if you have the characters, you're going to play them.
Yeah.
So we're out there on the on the porch, outside, out facing the academic quad, and fighting, Father Farge versus Professor McKay, looking like Indiana Jones. And we all thought, how funny would it be if Professor McKay and Farge would see this? And within like 3 minutes, Professor McKay walks up to see what we're doing out there and sees herself in the game. And less than 60 seconds later, Father Farge walks up too. And we get them to play each other. We get them to play as each other against each other. And Professor McKay won. And she was super stoked about that, but it was great. And just that moment there where it was the students and faculty and everyone coming together around this thing. It didn't matter anything else. We were just having a good time with it. There was, it's a fighting game, but who cared? We were just playing characters there, and they had a great time with it. They had a huge laugh. And it was something that we all were able to do together. And, outside of the, rigors of, actual academic study and, what we're doing there, spending a ton of money at a private university to hopefully get that piece of paper later. Here we are goofing off in the quad, having a really good time. And that's the thing about games. People think that they're for children, or women think that they're for boys or men, or not for them and stuff like that. It has nothing to do with any of that. Yeah. It's an entertainment medium that a lot of people can come around. If you take the time to try to understand it, you can really enjoy it and get into it. And it's just a way to express yourself, as some sort of entertainment. Like if you're going to a movie, or you're reading, or playing like board games, or just going out and enjoying nature. It's something you can do with other people that you can enjoy, discuss, learn from, or just have a good time. And just that moment was like one of those great things. I just remember seeing each other, the reactions at the characters that looked pretty much like each of them. It was pretty good.
What has science done?
If they had just seen the images, exactly. If they had just seen the images without any other information, you're like, what am I doing in that? Why am I there? It was a good likeness.
That's pretty funny.
But just those moments of that you could do that, in a game, people can enjoy it, have fun, have a great time. It was just something special, for all of us there. So it's one of the things I remember. If I try to think of, a moment like that I remember from my gaming career at all, it always comes back to being there and doing that and sharing that with them. So
one of those things, Rock Band, I think, came out the summer I graduated high school, and I played that with Katie, and God, that was like, it was really strange because that was like a farewell sort of tour. It felt like, because we would bring Rock Band with us everywhere. Mm-hmm. And Katie and her family, all three of her sisters all wanted this stuff, and so all of them together got all of the pieces of Rock Band, because it was expensive. You could drop like $200 something bucks on it.
Mm-hmm. Especially the Beatles one.
Yeah. But we played that, and we played that all summer long, and that and Guitar Hero. And Rock Band was great because people who couldn't play Guitar Hero could sing or you
Right.
know, try their hands at the drums, and you don't feel like
Right.
an idiot, because you definitely feel like an idiot in Guitar Hero if somebody's on expert and you're on even hard, you know,
right.
you're like, oh,
Yeah.
great. You know,
Yeah.
somebody's going, and you're just like, click, clack, click.
Yeah. Me and Josh, and that's how I met a lot of my San Marcos friends. Was we used to have Rock Band just at Josh's place, just chilling out.
I've only played either of those games a handful of times, which is really strange because
You seem to have a lot more community aspects to gaming, and it surprises me that you didn't play that more.
I think the friends that I had it here in San Marcos, and I was in college at the time, and friends over there didn't really have it as much, so I didn't get to play that as much. So I did play with my friends here in San Marcos. I think I may have played it once or twice while I was in college, just because I didn't know anyone who actually had Guitar Hero.
That was
guitars
the
and
hard
things.
part. Was
Yeah,
you had
people
to,
who had actually
you had to
had
find
it,
somebody who had it.
and then get the time to get them. So no one in my friends there really had it, or if they did, we didn't really play it. I didn't know that they did. So I knew people here in San Marcos who did, but I didn't get to see them at that point. And then got out of college and played it a few times, but then that just kind of tapered off.
Yeah.
Which is strange because I love music, and I really wish I would have played those games a whole lot more, and I never did.
Yeah. You have the next topic?
So, y'all, we've talked a lot about growing up with gaming and gaming sort of at the middle of our lives, but I want to talk about gaming now. Y'all mentioned that y'all tried to play Destiny and some other stuff that you've tried to do recently, but how do you feel now that you're an adult? Has the gaming experience changed for you? Have you been finding it more difficult to find time to game, to want to game, to get excited about new things going on?
One thing that I feel now that gaming is more mainstream, now that esports are super popular,
You can't play them anymore; they're too popular.
no, it's not about being hipster about gaming. It's like, oh, this is my nerd niche. You know, I am the nerdster. It's more that there's an elitism about a lot of certain things in gaming that I think puts off a lot of people, even people who've been gaming for a long time. I won't play a MOBA game because if I have to ask somewhere, it's like, hey, how do you do this thing in this game? Because I'm not sure. It's going to be like, noob, why are you even playing? If you don't know how to do this, you should just go home and play Hello Kitty Princess Island or something. You know, it's just this kind of like, there's no documentation really for this. There's some information here. And rather than try to learn in a match, you know, what all of my things do, I just want to know this one thing. So can we talk about that? And it's no. It's like, no, you're stupid for not knowing that already. Screw you.
That's something that really bothers me about a lot of games that I play with my friends, is the notion that not being the best means why should you even play, which I'm very good at games. On just an average level, I tend to be in a competitive level of games.
You don't want to brag about it.
And,
He's modest, too.
well, it's because I play a lot of games. It's not
No.
because I'm smarter or faster or better than people.
No, but it's true. You are good at games.
You beat, yeah. You
That
beat
doesn't mean
all
that
of
doesn't mean
us.
you have to have that attitude about gaming, though.
Yeah.
You want me to play the game even if I suck at it.
Yes, and I want to help people become better at those games, and I typically try to talk to them, and that's the thing, even on the other aspect of that, if you do try to help somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, they also will yell and scream at you, and you're like, oh, I literally saw you fumbling with the inventory. I thought I should help you out, like in DayZ that I played. God, there was no documentation on DayZ. Nobody had any idea what
that
anything
inventory
happened.
System
Is garbage, and
that's a nice way of putting it.
yeah. It wasn't designed for that in the first place, so it's
Right.
a little okay, but still, it was very bad. And I would try to help people out, and more than half the time they'd figure out that I knew what I was doing, and so they'd shoot me. But that's kind of an aspect of that game. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of things around that. Esports, anything that's linked to esports, I don't want to play because it has that.
That's a very evident change in the way that communities nowadays in gaming are formed. But you specifically, like, are you are you gaming still? Are you still a gamer?
That's interesting. I would say yes at a base level because I am. I play games as my main form of recreation. Trying to get into racing cars, it's a lot more expensive and difficult, and I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm the worst at it.
Just get Need for Speed. You don't need to buy the car anymore.
Oh, see, I hate those now. Yeah, and even Forza is getting like arcadey. It's weird.
It is. It is. But I was just pointing out Need for Speed.
Yeah,
I was
Filthy casual.
struggling.
Filthy casual.
Struggling to think of a
iRacing.com. You need to have a subscription. No, but that's even a little too hardcore for me.
Yeah, that is.
But I don't like a job application when I applied for promotion, and actually when I applied for the job in the very first place, I didn't want to label myself as a gamer. I felt like there was a lot of negative stigma that came along with that, and trying to become a manager. And they're like, what do you do for fun? I literally was like, I like to work on my car and
stare at spreadsheets.
I love staring at spreadsheets. My favorite thing to do. No, but I talked about Dungeons and Dragons instead.
Instead of
that was, and I felt like, and I still feel like that was a better, less negative stigma than being a gamer in quotes, because that sort of fell out of fashion. Like 10 years ago, that wouldn't have been true, right?
Right.
But I remember my mom asking me if I played Dungeons and Dragons when I was like 12 and saying, well, don't you do that. If anyone offers that, you come to me. Tell them, because
she thought
because the
devil
will get in you.
Right, exactly. Although then she bought me Harry Potter despite our priest saying that was I don't know. Life was complicated.
That's interesting, though.
It is.
In terms of how that's actually affected me playing games, I already said it a bunch of times, but I take a lot of me time for video games instead of, like, I'll just play alone, and there'll be other people playing who I could play with, and sometimes I just won't want to play with them because I don't want to play what they're playing, despite having it, which is such a weird difference from when I was a child, when there's a million things I wanted to play, and I couldn't, and now it always feels like I'm just becoming cynical and old because there's so many games that I don't want to play now, and sometimes I just have because I bought it because my friends are playing, or it's free to play. MechWarrior Online, I just have it on my computer because anytime they want to play it, I'll boot it up with them. So that's a weird difference, and of course, income level changes.
Yeah,
that helps a lot.
How about you, Miguel? Do you still see yourself as a gamer? Would you still consider yourself a gamer?
I probably have to class myself into the filthy casual side of that unashamedly, just because a lot of times I don't have.
There are no casuals here, Miguel.
Oh, well, then I'm going to leave. It was nice being a part of this.
The fact that you're on a podcast about it automatically skews the label, but
I think this is going to be more about how we perceive ourselves as gamers. Like,
right.
You were talking about how, like, a decade ago, saying that you were a role player was probably going to be the nerdiest thing with a negative stigma attached to it. And I would completely agree with you. 10 years ago, like exactly 10 years ago, or 11, 12 years ago, I was asked, like, come join this role-playing group, come play. And I was like, no. There are two things. Like, I'm nerdy. I'm a nerdy guy, right? There's two things that I don't do. I don't go to anime conventions, and I don't role play. 10 years down the road,
we see
right now, tonight, I'm excited to go home and see what I've leveled up in your campaign. And I work for an anime convention. I'm a director at an anime convention. So how things have changed and what's nerdy, but coming back to gaming, gaming was a thing that I did and people, understood or didn't understand or whatever. It was a thing. But now I get to the point where there is that stigma. I was talking with someone online, trying to meet someone and talking with them about things. And I mentioned a couple of years ago, we were actually thinking about doing that Let's Play where we were going to do Borderlands. I brought up that, we kind of were doing that and talking about that and how we had ideas for developing games and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, that was just kind of like oh, you're one of those people. That's weird. I didn't, why are we talking? And it was just kind of like there's other aspects to my life beyond that. You know,
Yeah,
like there's
that's
other
what
things we can
defines
do.
you.
Like I cook and go to movies and do like this plethora of other things. Like, oh, but you're a gamer.
Yeah, you're right.
So
Why
it's-
are we talking?
So it's just right. And then that's the point where I was like, well, I just made a gesture at the microphone for those of you who can't see me.
Which is everybody because we don't have a camera.
So yeah, I mean, I enjoy games. I don't find myself with a lot of time uninterrupted to play, and that's kind of what's shaped my level of gaming recently. It's really hard for me to devote time to play something that is online, where I actually have to be in a mission that I can't pause. So
I do have a lot of uninterrupted time now, and I can't. This is probably more of self-psyche stuff. You what?
Rub it in.
Rub it in.
Just
Rub it in. I'm a kept man. But I can't bring myself to do that anymore. That's sort of a personal guilt thing. But the only times that I can is with this gaming group, right? And so having other people who I have responsibility for, because I do in those games, I have to help them and I have to lead them often. That when I have to give myself responsibility for other people in the games, it has to be with somebody else for me to have that uninterrupted time, despite me loving playing by myself. That's a weird aspect of gaming that I never had before either. I used to just take my time and it was my time, but now I'm married and I've got all these friends and I don't know, somehow I gotta owe it to them to spend my time paying attention to them. What about you? What do you think of yourself as?
So there's a huge gap in my gaming resume, where I didn't really do any gaming. Most of that was we talked about the StarCraft community. Most of that was I'm not good at StarCraft. I didn't really play StarCraft. I was pretty much only in it for the chatting to the community, and that sort of carried on all the way up until maybe a couple of years ago, where I sort of started getting into PC gaming more. And even then, it was maybe once a week or every couple of weeks. But I would slowly work my way through Borderlands one mission at a time. And then I did Skyrim, where I did not complete any of the main missions. And... all side quests.
Who does,
Right. It's hard for me to. I guess I'm more. I feel like I'm more of a filthy casual than Miguel is claiming to be. But we've started this podcast. We've started some other projects and stuff, and I feel that sort of revitalizing in me. I'm more excited now. I was super anxious to get Sonic the Hedgehog for the Master System, because I was just amping myself up, watching videos of the game and reading about it, and then we finally get to play it, and I'm terrible at it. But I didn't get to play Sonic the Hedgehog 1 for the Genesis growing up. We started with Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and being able to play through that also, I felt like a kid again. Like I could love gaming again, and reading the news and all this, just getting more and more excited again. Whereas before, I wouldn't even bother reading the news. I wouldn't bother finding out about it. I would have never have known that Pokemon X, or Pokemon Moon and Sun or whatever it is coming out this year.
Pokemon S&M, what they'll be shortened to.
But yeah, it's having these projects, these attachments to gaming again, has sort of revitalized my love of gaming. Not to say that I ever stopped loving gaming. I love gaming. I don't have the motivation to do it, whereas now I do, and that's, I think that's a big part of what drives me in most aspects of my life too, is the motivation. I can get up at any time of the day with any amount of sleep, as long as I have a reason to get up, even if it's 1 hour of sleep. I mean, I find that I can do pretty much anything that I need to do as long as I have a motivated reason to do it. And with gaming, I love to game. I love to watch people game, which is what I do most of the time. Is I'll watch YouTube videos of people gaming, but I don't do it myself because I didn't have that drive to do it. So it was just sort of a thing that I did every now and then.
And that's really interesting to hear, your self-referential on that, because I know very few people who are as passionate about games as you are. You have deeply, deeply intense, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and ruminations about games and gaming and culture and games as art and as a overlooked medium, that it strikes me as odd that you think that you were more casual and don't have that motivation to play games, because I know how deeply affected you are by them.
Yeah, it's a very weird relationship that I have with games. I mean, you look around and this room that we're in is just full of stuff dedicated to gaming. I have a collection of video game consoles throughout the years. And many of them are my original hardware, but none of them are plugged in.
Well, it would be difficult to have them all plugged in.
Well,
He could make it happen.
that's going to happen at some point.
You could make it happen, but it would still be difficult to have it happen.
Until a couple of weeks ago, when we decided to catalog all of the games that I had so that we knew which games we could play for our channel. All of the games that I owned were shoved in that box right there, packed away. It's just I like the memory of gaming. I said shared experience earlier. I like the shared experience of having those memories with people. Sitting in a room alone gaming never really connected with me, but gaming with my mom, gaming with my cousin, with you guys is really, that's gaming for me. And I spent a lot of time alone and just sort of drifted away, and that's sort of where I ended up until I sort of revitalized it with my collection here, and now I revitalized my love of, or my passion about gaming with the collection of consoles, but I've sort of revitalized my love of playing the video games and experiencing the video games firsthand with this channel, with this motivation to try and make a fun history through the ages project with you, and that's gaming for me now.
I think it's interesting because we've got 3 people here, and we're only like not that far apart in age, but having such different ideas of what it means to you and aspects of like what you're trying to play and how it's changed and affected your life is very interesting, because like the current stereotype for gamers, which is why I don't like being labeled one anymore, right, is that guy who's playing Madden on the 360 still.
It's the bro stereotype nowadays. You're a sports bro or a Call of Duty bro.
Yeah, is the one that kills me a lot.
I will have to admit I have both those games in my collection and play them unashamedly.
I have Madden 95.
Yeah, but it's the idea of the person playing. I played NFL Blitz. That's the one I played.
There you go.
We all played NFL Blitz. That was a great game.
Amazing. Yeah,
NFL Blitz, NBA Jam.
I hate football as a thing, and I love NFL Blitz. It's just interesting to me because it's the idea of that person who they have a really funny. It's one of those stereotypes that's impossible. It's like Schrodinger's immigrant, right? Simultaneously doing no work while taking
Doing
your
all the
job.
jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, all of the jobs, not just one. But it's the idea that they are always playing that game and always shouting into the microphone at all times, while at the same time being, a super social frat bro who goes out or whatever. And when I was getting married, I had people, including my own parents, kind of talk to me about, like, as if I was doing cigarettes or something with playing video games. And they're like, you're not going to have as much time to do that, being married and you got responsibilities and things. And at that point, I had been working my butt off for like almost 3 years to pay for this wedding, to help put her through friggin' pharmacy school. What else? What more responsibility could I have there besides?
She's going to start working now.
Yeah.
And she and I both play games.
Yeah, and that was the thing I had to explain all the time. It's like, I play games with Katie. Like, it's not me alone playing a game being like, give me a sandwich. Do. Yeah, well, your mom's a blah, blah, blah. It's
her.
Yeah,
doing that, asking you for the sandwich, going blah blah blah.
That has literally happened.
I figured it had, because that just sounds like.
Well, it's funny because we constantly try to give each other that experience, even though it's not necessarily even what either one of us wants. But I will be like, I'm gonna cook us some grilled cheese tomato soup while she plays this game, because I'm not seeing her this happy playing a game for a while, and I don't want her to stop playing it. The community thing is really funny too, because I think this is the first time like Katie's gotten into that Dragon Blaze game or maybe it's not Dragon Blaze, but something like that on the iOS and Android. But it has chat, and she joined a guild, and she's like hyper competitive and talking about the meta strategies and things like that, and talking about trying to convince noobs and to get things. I've never heard her talk that way, and it's really funny because when
my aunt did that with Castle Clash.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
She's trying to peddle that to everyone, too.
Yeah, that's really funny to me because Katie's never been into the guild, into the meta, into the strats. And I thought this was going to last a month. And it's been like a year. and she's now like real high up in her guild or whatever, which is funny because they're all a bunch of truckers in her guild, which cracks me up. But yeah, I'm... It's interesting because there's a little part of you when somebody's doing that you want, the attention when they're paying attention to it that much. But I've never seen her be that invested in the game, and so I don't want to like break it because I don't want to break that spell, because I remember the first time I had that spell with EverQuest and how much it meant to me and how much it's defined me. Oh my god, do you know how much of my memory is devoted to EverQuest? I can boot that game up at any point in time and know how to get from point A to point B anywhere, what the loot drop tables are, where every NPC is. And there was a guide, but it was so basic, and like the wiki is like so incomplete, and I know everything about that game. It's insane. And it's funny to watch somebody else start that, especially so much later than when I did, but it's a fun experience to share. Although it's annoying when it's 7 a.m. and it's just and I'm like, but it's understanding. That's been really funny because I felt like I couldn't get invested in that again, and I feel I kind of felt like I've been the opposite of how you were doing that. I feel like I need to become much more serious about making games and less about playing them, and it makes it somehow so much harder because when I look at games, I'm very interested in new mechanics or new technology. And if it has neither of those, or story mechanics, not even just mechanics, but like Last of Us,
Mm-hmm.
a much more way to make an emotional connection to the player. And that Belgian studio shut down and angrily left the scene with their failed game, and that made me mad. Art fails. That's what it does. Like, if you're wanting to recognize it as art,
not everything
that
can
failure.
be a winner. Yeah. Learn and grow.
Yeah, so that made me sad, but that kind of makes me sad in modern ages, because what I see, what pops up on my radar all the time is now businesses have figured out they can make a lot of money in video games, and they decide to do what business does, especially when it's business majors entering into a new field that they know nothing about themselves, what do? They emulate, because that is a standard business tactic. Emulate success and you will become successful. And in an artistic venture, I'm not going to say it's a failure, because clearly it can work in some cases, but it is no means a safe bet, and you're better off going with a creative process, because that's actually the same bet. You're just, except that you're adding something to the world. And so I find myself more and more cynical about it. And I apply to all of these places, and I've gotten an interview with a game company, and everything they asked me was wrong about what I was, thinking of. And I go to GDC and I talk to all these developers, and so many of them are so much passionate, amazing people. I met like John Romero, and he's an amazing guy. But I'm like, what are you looking forward to? And he's like, man, right now I just love looking at Doom. I'm thinking about the levels I made and things like that. And I'm like, and he plays Doom with you. You'll play Doom with him at GDC if you go. Like, you literally can. And I'm like, but what's new, man? It's just like, he's got some things, but he doesn't seem that passionate about it. And I talked to Sid Meier.
Civ.
He doesn't.
Civ
Meier. Yeah.
I'm just saying, that's all he did. Civ.
Civ, yeah, Civilization. But we talked about all of the games in the past. And he's like, and this is coming out. And I'm like, what's real cool about it? And he's like, you can go a little bit further into space. And I'm like, what the shit? Like, where did all the passion come from these amazing people? And it's just all getting murdered by businesses. And that's why I really love the indie field.
Yes.
And how much easier it is for them to operate and to reach fans and to be viable to the extent they need to be to survive.
And the linchpin for almost all indie games is the PC.
Yes.
And that's kind of why I'm so invested in it. And it's interesting because I love seeing all the older game consoles. Without it, none of this would be possible.
It's also a lot easier in the current generation now for you to say, I'm going to make my creative indie game on the PC, and then Microsoft or Sony are going to see it and they're going to like it, and then it's a simple just recompile it process to bring it over to the PlayStation or bring it over to the Xbox. So it's now a lot safer for things to start on the PC and reach everyone.
Absolutely, and that's what's really interesting, because you don't have. Do you have a PS4?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so you do have a current gen.
I have all the Sonys.
Yeah. It's funny because I wanted the PS4 more than I wanted the Xbox One, but I ended up getting pressured into getting the Xbox One.
I'm sorry.
It wasn't just you.
I know.
I can't be pressured by one person. It has to be at least three.
But I was pulled into it that way, and I had to pass on the pressure.
I know, right?
Because the people who convinced me to get an Xbox One, of them I've only played with one person.
I get a text message today asking me to buy a PS4 from a friend. So that's funny.
You've got 3 people now. We're pressuring you.
Do you have a PS4
No,
yet?
I don't have a PS4 yet.
He's pressuring you as well, though.
And to pressure himself also.
You can pressure me as much as you want, as long as you pay for it.
Yeah, really. That's also really funny because they're kind of more expensive now, right? I remember the Nintendo 64 being $150, but that was in the 90s.
Oh, you're talking about consoles in general?
Yeah.
I'm not prepared I'm not prepared to talk about cost versus inflation versus.
Yeah, if you
inflation, it's like $230 or something.
No, if you adjust for inflation, a lot of consoles were actually
more expensive.
Way more expensive.
It depends on where you go out, but in the heyday when I was buying consoles or looking at the
actual when they weren't new.
They weren't new. They're a year old.
Yeah, that's
but still a year old. PS4 is like the same damn price.
So you're talking about the devaluation of the console. The console costs a lot less year or two after release versus the PS3, which will never go down in price ever.
Oh man, do you know how much?
It's a different model. So
absolutely.
Back then you would make a batch because you didn't have the instant feedback. So you would make a batch of things. They would go to the shops, and then things that sat taking up warehouse space for so long.
Right, and so they'd want to sell them
You
more.
have to get rid of it. So you have blowout sales and all that other stuff.
Right.
But the actual console cost, like that the manufacturers wanted them sold at, they adjusted for inflation were typically more than what we're getting now. Some of these things go for about $700-800 when you adjust for inflation.
Some of them went for more in actual dollars at the time, didn't they? There was like one that was like $1,000, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. I don't have that one.
Yeah.
The CDI was really expensive. Yeah.
I was gonna say I bought myself a PS3 after my first year. So I started working at Best Buy as a summer job, but I started a little bit early. After my first year of college in San Antonio at the most lucrative Best Buy in the world at the time. So they told us. And I told you we were selling PS3s all the time, right? And I wanted one, but Metal Gear Solid 4 was coming out, and I was such a huge Metal Gear fan. I only made maybe $1,100 that summer, despite having to come in at 5 a.m. every third day. 4 a.m. That was awful. But I spent almost all of that. I think it was $800 for the Metal Gear Solid 4. It might have been $6. It was a lot. It was enough to the point where it was like all the money that was in my bank account I put towards that PS4, because my dad was like, save up that money, put it towards college. And then I saw how little $600 did for you in college, and I was like,
get you a stick of gum.
Yeah, I was like, screw it, I'll get myself a PS3 and just, if it need be, I'll be in debt, because there's like...
I actually did go into debt to buy my PS3.
Yeah.
I had just wrecked my car and did not have any credit, so I couldn't get a credit card or anything like that. So I thought, this is probably a good time for me to start building up my credit. No one would give me a credit card, though. So Josh co-signed on the PS3 that I've got downstairs, and I went with the largest one, the 350 gigabyte one, because that was the one in America that had backwards compatibility.
Yeah.
By the time I bought mine, though, a month prior, they had stopped selling them, and so it was not backwards compatible.
Nice. Yeah, that Metal Gear Solid 4 one, I still have that, but I look at that and it just, what was I thinking? That was the first console I'd ever bought for myself, and go figure, I
know
had
someone
no
who,
idea of the value.
I know someone who would love to buy that from you.
They won it for $800.
Anselmo is a huge Metal Gear fanatic.
I was.
He is. He's got them all.
I also have them all. And I have special editions of a couple of them. And I want the figurines. And
he's got the figurines.
I dressed up as Snake from Metal Gear Solid 3 for 2 years in a row. And made Katie be Meryl. So I think I have some stock in the Metal Gear fandom. But, but yeah.
All right. I think that we've covered a lot of topics today. And I think that we've had a good show. I think we're going to go ahead and call it here today. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for listening. Let us know what you think, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you want to hear more of. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at BTPixels. And see y'all next time.
Yeah, now's a good time to get your opinion out, because not a million followers. Once we're huge, rich, famous, and successful, your opinion's going to be harder to hear. So do it now.
Thanks for listening.
All right.